Spiritual believing in God, servant of the one true God religion. Religious aspect. Detailed brief breakdown of spiritual. Believing in God, serving the one true God religion. Religious aspect. And if God created us, and who created God? Best answer reaction. My name is Christ, we're past work of our channel. So how are we doing? Spiritual believing in God, serving the one true God religion. Religious aspect, detailed breakdown of spiritual believing in God, serving the one true God religion. Religious aspect, and if God created us, then who created God? Best answer reaction. The term spirit means animating or vital principle in man and animals. It is derived from the Old French esprit, which comes from the Latin spiritus, soul, ghost, courage, vigor, breath, and is related to spirare, to breathe. In the Vulgate, the Latin word spiritus is used to translate the Greek pneuma and Hebrew ruach. And for many, this involves trusting that God is real, personally, involved in life, and worthy wants faithful commitment. He goes beyond mere intellect, agreement, encompassing truth, trust, reliance on God's promises, and wisdom, and commitment to live according to God's teaching. So, will, the concept of a servant of one true God is not a single religion, but a fundamental idea found in various monotheistic religions, including Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. It describes a follower who is dedicated to serving and obeying the singular divine being central to their faith, emphasizing concepts like divine will, compassion, devotion to God according to research. And we will also be reacting to if God created us and who created God. Best answer reaction. That's the reaction. I'll tell you my reports for the reaction of the video.
Question is, where did God come from? When heaven and earth were yet unmade, when there was empty blackness, and void formlessness, and darkness was on the face of the deep. When time was yet unknown, thou in thy bliss and majesty did live, and love alone. He called light out of darkness, he called cosmos out of chaos, that is, he called order out of confusion. But the question still clamors for an answer. Where did God come from?
The earth was created 6,000 years ago in 6 days by God.
Sure.
I am confused. Being philosophically consistent and being a very honest person, I'm sure you can tell me where God came from. And in addition, once you've told me where God comes from, please try to clarify how you can figure that a spiritual force can have an impact on a material universe to create it.
So you're telling me that it's not healthy to obsess over your partner 24/7 like I do? What you've described there is
If you believe that God created the universe, then logically you've got to ask the question, who created God? And then you have to ask, who created the God that created the God that created the God that created God that created God, and so on ad infinitum.
That's a very obscure question. But the Bible does say that no one created God. He had no beginning and he had no end.
Analyze it for a moment.
As a pastor, I should know this.
created God.
My name is Chris Kipkogate, Bridget, and who is it? Kisanai Kimutai, and all these other things.
If you ask that question, it shows you've immediately categorized God as created. So you're talking about a created God. This question is extremely interesting because it's an illustration of a question that already rules out the explanation that's most likely to be true. Because the Christian claim is that God wasn't created.
The world, whatever you believe, if you grant that, you can't get something from nothing. You can't get something from nothing.
Bro, it's
It
true.
can't be the case if you accept, as I think everybody does, that this option is ruled out. Once upon a time there was absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden there was everything. Or anything. You can't get anything from nothing. That just goes against all logic. So if you believe that you can't get something from nothing, and you grant that there is now something, which I'm hoping you do since I'm talking to you and I'm a something and so are you, then there must have always been a something. Everyone has to believe that something has been forever. Otherwise we'd still have nothing. So it's a question of what is the something that has been around forever? Now here's the thing. Everything we know about the physical world tells us that it's not a good candidate for something that has been around forever. Especially since the 30s of the last century, with the acceptance of the Big Bang Theory, which is pretty much uniform now, which is telling us that this universe, as we now know it, is a one-way show. It's a one-time, one-way show. Everything indicates that energy is being used up, as I mentioned earlier. Second law of thermodynamics is very well established.
Big Bang Theory is a very rubbish theory, and I don't hold to that theory as a Christian.
The suns are running out of energy. We now know that the
Although I have been an evolutionist that believes in evolution.
outer rim of the universe, the farther out we go, the faster it's expanding. So the expansion seems to be
Got that from a show from Young Sheldon and Big Bang Theory show.
speeding up. And we have no way of explaining that. Energy is being used to,
And the Belarusian Big Bang Theory.
and everything we know about it is that it's used up. So the physical world, physical reality isn't a good candidate for the something that must have always been for there to be anything. So whatever there was that is the cause of what is, must be quite different than what is. Because what is, as far as we know it, can't always have been. And I submit to you that all contingent reality, which is simply reality that could be otherwise, this chair, you and me, virtually everything you're seeing here, it came into being, it goes out of being, and it's forever on the precipice of non-being. It's not solid. It disappears in time. That all those things don't explain themselves. None of this explains themselves. And the totality of contingent things don't explain themselves. They're like Rome. Everything depends on everything else. It's like dominoes. And at some point, you have to suppose that there must be something that's very much unlike what we're trying to explain what we're in the process of.
So if God was uncreated, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
That's in John 1:1.
He already was. So the central Christian claim is, and in Judaism and Islam, of course, equally, is that God is eternal.
In Islam is a rubbish religion, but I still support him at the moment.
So the question by definition doesn't make any point to him. The only way you can get anything out of it then, in a negative sense, is to assume that everything is in the category of the created, but that's just begging the original question. And the Greeks were interested in it, and that's why John's Gospel starts with those words. In the beginning the Word already was. And then it says all things came to be through him. The Greeks were interested in the question of two categories. The things that came to be, the created things, and the things that already were. And the question resolved down to this: is there a thing or a being that never came to be? And that is the Christian claim. And he's called God. You say that who created God is a legitimate question. I don't think it is. But let me assume now that it is. You believe that the universe created you. So I beg thee now to ask you, using your own question, who created your creator? I'm waiting still for the answer. I was talking to about 1,000 scientists, and a man came up to me afterwards, a physicist. He said, "That was very interesting when I talk about God." But he said, "Do you know, I detect you're a Christian. As a Christian, you're
As all Christians are.
obliged to believe
We are obliged to believe.
that God is eternal. That
That's correct. I agree with that.
Jesus was God and man. That's God, a mathematician talks. This is absurd. Can you explain it to me? Well, I said, "Can I ask you a question first?" He said, "Sure." So I said, "Tell me, what is consciousness?" And he thought for a second, and then he said, "I don't know." I said, "That's okay, let me try an easy one. What is energy?" Well, he said, "I'm a physicist, I can measure energy, I can use it." I said, "You know, that's not my question. What is it?" He said, "I don't know." Oh, I said, "You don't know? Tell me," I said, "do you believe in consciousness?" Yes, he said. "Do you believe in energy?" Yes, he said. So I said, "You believe in these two things, you don't know what they are." I said, "Should I write you off as an intellect?" And he said, "Please don't." I said, "But that's exactly what you were going to do with me 5 minutes ago." Now I said, if you don't know what energy is, and nobody does, if you don't know what energy is, don't be surprised if energy, like gravity, and consciousness are a mystery. Don't be surprised if you're going to get an element of this in God. You're bound to get it.
Question, who created God? Well, this is not at all difficult to answer. A timeless, eternal being cannot have a cause. As Keith Ward points out in his book, God, Chance, and Necessity, if one asks what caused God, the answer is that nothing could bring into being a reality which wholly transcends space-time and which is self-existent.
That's true. I agree with that in the Bible as well.
To fail to grasp such an idea is to fail to grasp what God is. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Something cannot come into being out of nothing. But if something is eternal and timeless, then it doesn't fall under that first premise. It doesn't need a cause. Even atheists like Daniel Dennett recognize that if eternal verities exist, like numbers or mathematical objects, they don't need a cause because they never come into being. They don't begin to exist. And the concept of God is the concept of an eternal, self-existent, necessary being, and therefore the answer is simply that God is uncaused, he is self-existent.
Our definition of God is the uncreated creator of the universe. So to ask the question, who created the uncreated creator, is kind of like asking, what sound is silence? Or, do you see what I'm saying? It's the definition of silence that precludes us from asking the question. And that is really what we do when we ask the question, who created the uncreated creator of the universe? Do we as Christians have a problem in grounding our beliefs in a God that is uncreated? Does the atheist have a better answer to this? Well, I'll tell you, it's not believing. And I was not believing until I was 35. I also believe in uncreated creator. Maybe it was multiple generations. Maybe it was some quantum environment in which our universe emerged spontaneously. Regardless of what it was that caused the universe, as an atheist, I would have told you that that thing was uncreated. So it turns out everyone believes there's an uncreated creator.
I want you to fill in the story of the rest of the beginning of the universe. God, spiritual matter, impact on material matter.
Okay, so 2 questions.
Go ahead.
All right, your question, where did God come from, assumes that you're thinking of the wrong, obviously it displays that you're thinking of the wrong God, because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter. If he's affected by time, space, or matter, he's not God. Time, space, and matter is what we call a continuum. All of them have to come into existence at the same instant. Because if there were matter but no space, where would you put it? If there were matter and space but no time, when would you put it? You cannot have time, space, or matter independently. They have to come into existence simultaneously. God is presented in 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven. There's space. And the earth. There's matter. So you have time, space, matter created. A trinity of trinities there. You know, time is past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. Matter has solid or gas. You have a trinity of trinities created instantaneously. And the God who created them has to be outside of them. If he's limited by time, he's not God. The God who created this computer is not in the computer. He's not running around in there changing the numbers on the screen, okay? The God who created this universe is outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's not affected by it. So, and the concept of a spiritual force cannot have any effect on a material body. Well, obviously that explains many things like emotions and love and hatred and envy and jealousy and rationality. I mean, if your brain is just a random collection of chemicals that all by chance over billions of years come up, and you don't see all reasoning processes and the thoughts that you create. So, your question, where did God come from, is assuming that limited God. And that's your problem. The God that I worship is not limited by time, space, or matter. If I could fit the infinite God in my 3-pound brain, he would not be worth worshiping, that's for certain.
He's a very good debater.
And after he came from nowhere. Now that's theologically correct and it's biblically sound. For Habakkuk saw him when he left the healings of healing, the Holy One from Mount Paran, and his healing something means nothing or nowhere. So he came from nowhere. I made that statement in Detroit some time ago, and a man talked with me after the meeting, and he said, "Preacher, let's be reasonable about this thing. You up there tonight talking about God came from nowhere. That doesn't make sense. Let's be reasonable about it." I said, "All right. If you just want to be reasonable about it, the reason God came from nowhere, there wasn't anywhere for him to come from. And coming from nowhere, he stood on nothing. And the reason he had to stand on nothing, there was nowhere for him to stand. And standing on nothing, he reached out where there was nowhere to reach and caught something when there was nothing to catch, and hung something on nothing and told it to save us. Now, you'll find that in Job 26 and 7, that he hung this world on nothing. Standing on nothing, he took the hammer of his own will.
Sure.
And he struck the anvil of his omnipotence and sparked through their flesh. And he
Finish it
caught them in
now.
the tips of his fingers and
I think this is a very good debater. Very good answer. I put that challenge in the description to watch out the description of the original video in the description if you want to watch it. And find the answer to that question. We'll come back with full content as well. Anyway, peace out. It's Crossbury Ministries, Crossbury Apostle. Crystal Korea, Richard Davis, Kids Alive, see you in the next video. Don't forget to go and like, share, subscribe, and join our Don't forget to go and like, share, subscribe, and join our Don't forget to go and like, share, subscribe, and join our See you. And there's 16 minutes left of the video. Anyway, don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe. Charles Crossbury Apostle. Watch your videos, subscribe, Charles Crossbury Apostle. Peace out, subscribe for more issues.